You are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 118. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how life with less alcohol is more fun than you think. I work with high achievers who struggle to drink a glass of wine without it turning into 2 bottles. I'm the one they call when they want to take it or leave it. So if you want to change your relationship with alcohol that doesn't involve counting days sober, you're in the right place. Hello everybody and welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to cover a client testimonial. This is somebody I worked with who has created amazing results for herself, and just this change of relationship with alcohol has gone on to spur her to do more amazing things in her life. Now, when talking about client testimonials, it is very common that I would just use the client's first name, and then we would typically record the interview. Now, in the case of the person I'm featuring today, she has an extremely public-facing role in entertainment, and she was extremely keen to share her experience of working with me. But in order to protect her privacy, I have gone ahead and I'm going to be narrating the conversation. I'm going to be narrating to you today what she told me. Client confidentiality when I'm working with people is critically important. And this feels like the right way of sharing this client's story to you. So let's go. All right. So I started out by asking my client to tell me a little bit about herself, what she had tried in the past, and all those sorts of things. So you should be able to follow the train of the conversation, and I may now and then interject, the specific question I asked, but otherwise this is what she told me. I was the kind of drinker who would mostly drink alone at home. I live alone, I'm self-employed, and it was my way of switching off at the end of the day. I tried the traditional 12-step recovery routes about 10 years ago, and I was successfully sober for about 3.5 years. But some things about that approach didn't really work for me. And so after another few years of drinking again, I was searching for something else. I had been listening to your podcast for a few months, so it was a really good introduction to who you were, because choosing a coach or a mentor is quite a big deal. And I already felt that I knew you, and I liked your straight-talking, no-nonsense approach. It just seemed like common sense. I wanted to just drink socially, because I felt like the unhealthy drinking was all happening when I was on my own. I wasn't confident in my ability to change, and I was really reluctant to spend any money on something that might end up not working. So that was how she explained the beginning of our working relationship. And then I asked my client to talk about the experience of doing the work. Here's what she told me. Well, at first it seemed fairly novel that you were telling me to just plan what drinks I was going to have and not to restrict them. And I was a kind of drinker who would never have alcohol in the house. I'd never planned to drink, but I'd always end up nipping to the supermarket or a local shop for a bottle of wine. And so it was weird when we first started to put a drink plan together, and I had to say what I was going to drink each night. And so I scheduled a bottle here, a bottle there. I went to the supermarket and I bought the whole week's worth of wine in one go, which was novel. But it was also an interesting exercise because it took away all the worry about, oh no, I need to nip out and get wine, or I'm being naughty. So whatever thrill I was getting out of that was no longer there. And then working on reducing that to pretty much 0 was fascinating. These days I would call myself mostly teetotal. It's something that I didn't think was possible, and it's something that I'd never really considered before. It was all or nothing before. I then asked her about the sense of who's in charge. Is it the alcohol or her, and where alcohol fits in with her life these days. Here's what she told me. It's absolutely me in charge now, not the alcohol, and planning in advance plays a huge part in that. The alcohol doesn't really have a place now. I have an occasional exception socially maybe, but that's it. It's not something I do in response to things. It's not something I do to switch off. It's not something I do when I'm happy or sad about something. It's not part of my identity anymore. We then got on to the, in my opinion, much more fascinating angle of this work, which is how by changing your relationship with alcohol, this affects other areas of your life beyond, what am I going to drink and how am I going to feel when I'm not drinking so much? Here's what my client told me. Well, it's been interesting because over this time working with you, I've had quite a few emotional challenges, and one in particular. And it actually became a really good opportunity to learn from how I react, how I feel, what I do in response to those feelings and thoughts, and what the outcomes can be rather than what I always just presumed it had to be. That's been so interesting. I've been able to feel my feelings better than I had before because I wasn't numbing them. This has been painful, but a really important learning exercise. I then asked her what has been her favorite part of doing this work. Here's what she told me. Well, the thing that stuck with me, and I know I've mentioned it a couple of times already, is the drink plan, because it's helped me in lots of other areas in my life. Because I can look at my week at a glance and see what's going on, what challenges I might have, and how I've thought out every scenario. So if I've got something challenging coming up that I'm dreading, then I can have a think around that dread and what it means. Does it need to be dread? Can it just be something that I can learn from and have new thoughts about? And I've incorporated that into a bigger kind of life. I've called it my life planner now. So as a perimenopausal woman, I can also plan where I am in my months and what my hormones might be doing, how I should be eating during that particular week. And it's become a bigger thing in my life that's helped me manage lots and lots of other things. I then asked her about whether she was nervous about spending money on something, on whether this might not work, right? Because that's a fear that many people have when they first approach me about working with me. So I asked her what she would want to say to somebody who is worried about that. Here's what she told me. I'd say it's definitely worth it. For me, I think quite early on we worked out how much I was spending on wine a month and figured out that it was equal to what I would be paying you. And so at the end of our time together, I came out mostly sober, then I'd be quids in for the future. So financially, it's definitely worth it. Because I think I've been pretty much drinking zero for at least 3-4 months. So it maybe cost me half of what I paid. And it's just been a wonderful learning opportunity that I wouldn't have had I just been trying to white knuckle it or do it on my own. I've learned more about myself than just my drinking. What I'd say to other people is remain open-minded. If you stick with the process, it'll work, and you'll be delighted with the things you learn about yourself. I've really enjoyed the process of getting to know myself and learning to trust myself, learning to know that I've got my own back. That's been so worth it because it's changed my internal narrative. I wasn't even conscious of my internal narratives before and how I was being so horrible to myself. Being able to change that and trust myself is fundamental in improving many areas of my life. My relationship with myself comes first. I just feel so ready to go out and tackle life now. And like I keep saying, there are lots of other areas in my life that have benefited because of this. Relationships that I've overcome obstacles with. Thinking about my future and my health has vastly improved. I think all of us former heavy drinkers, or if you're a current heavy drinker, we all have a deep-rooted fear of what's going to happen to our health in the future. To have done something about that has been a massive relief. So that's the summary of my conversation with my client. And I hope you will see there that while she engaged me to help her to stop over drinking, which is a result 100% achieved, the ramifications of the coaching went far, far, far beyond was she going to drink a glass of wine that night or not. If this resonates, if you want this too, if you want to create this kind of life for yourself, then let's talk. It's really easy. The next steps, I want you to go to 90dayslater.co and click on book a call. You'll get time on my calendar. Pick a slot that works for you. This call is free. We will talk about where you are, where you want to be, and I will build the exact plan to get you there. And if you're scared, do it anyway. Not one of my clients, not one of them, did not have a tingle of fear about would this work, was this worth it? And yet they all backed themselves to go forward. You can too. All right, that's it for this week. I'll see you next time. If you like what you're learning in the podcast and you want to take the work further and achieve total freedom around alcohol, let's talk. I help my clients stop reaching for that first glass of wine the moment 6 p.m. rolls around and they don't miss out on life. Email me for more information on anna@90dayslater.co. And if you did enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and review to help others find the 90 Days Later podcast.